It's the sound of ideas from 90.3 WCPN Idea Stream. I'm Mike McIntyre. Glad to have you with us this morning. They say age is just a number, but when does that number become a prime number, and how long does it stay that way? And I'm not talking mathematically. I mean, were you in your prime in your 20s already blazing a path and making the world a better place? Is the flame still burning in your 80s? Age is just a number, but some people, it seems, find a way to multiply it. This morning, we're going to meet incredible 20-somethings and indefatigable octogenarians and beyond. They were chosen and honored recently by Crain's Cleveland Business for the publication's 20 in their 20s and 8 over 80 lists. You've heard of the generation gap. Today's show is a bridge. We'll welcome those guests in just a bit, but first, we want to update you on an important public health issue that we spend a lot of time discussing here on The Sound of Ideas: lead poisoning. It's a huge problem in Cleveland, where exposure to lead can cause serious health consequences, including severe cognitive impairment in children. Tomorrow, the Cleveland Museum of Natural History will host a panel discussion aimed at highlighting the seriousness of the threat that lead poses and looking at efforts to rid aging homes of lead paint and to protect inhabitants. Taking the Lead on Lead is set for 6 to 9 tomorrow evening, and it's aimed at rallying the community behind the issue. We have details on our website, ideastream.org/ideasnow, and we'll get some details right now with Cuyahoga County Health Commissioner Terry Allen. Very good to have you with us, Terry.
Nice to be back, Mike.
You're a panelist on this discussion tomorrow.
I am.
So what are you hoping people will come away with after this conversation, here and at that discussion?
Well, I'm really glad that you're covering this segment because it's important for people to understand that lead poisoning isn't a thing of the past. It's very much an issue of the present, and that it can affect any child, and it's important to put it in that context. But the issue here is for people to understand it's a real problem, that they know what to do about it, how to address lead concerns in their home, and how to take action to protect themselves, their families, and their friends.
Our number is 216-578-0903. We're going to spend a few minutes on this topic, so if you want to jump in on lead poisoning, now's the time to call. 216-578-0903, 866-578-0903. It's something we spent a lot of time paying attention here on the Sound of Ideas and on Idea Stream in general. In Cuyahoga County, 15% of children tested under age 6 were lead poisoned at some point since birth. Models predict lead poisoning in the county's urban neighborhoods and inner-ring suburbs may be much higher, much as 30%. We're talking about a real epidemic here.
Right. It's important for people to understand that this is there is some conception out there about this is about paint chips, and that's an issue with the chips. It's really about powdering paint that then gets in between window wells. It's friction points like doors. It's on front porches. It's along foundations of houses, and kids are the carpet crawlers communicated into their mouth, and it becomes a risk. It can cause issues around IQ. It can have affect kids' ability to learn in school. It can have aggression implications that affect certainly interactions with the juvenile justice system, and it is entirely preventable.
We had John Sobolowski here on The Sound of Ideas last year with Nick Costell, one of our Idea Stream reporters who's been working diligently on the lead issue. And John Sobolowski, who's the Cuyahoga County supervisor for lead poisoning, talked about the severity of the issue in many different neighborhoods.
If there's no poverty and people can fix their homes, the rates of lead poisoning go way down. As I believe Nick said earlier in the segment, 500,000 housing units, they estimate 94% of those were built before 1978. So there's no shortage of houses that can potentially poison children. It's just a question of how much exposure takes place within those houses due to deteriorated lead-based paint.
So these neighborhoods can be improved. I mean, there's ways to improve these things. If we didn't have these deteriorating old houses, we'd have much less lead poisoning.
Absolutely. We are faced with the fact that we do have an older housing stock, and so we need to take steps to begin to address it. Our purpose at the Museum of Natural History tomorrow night is to begin to orient people first with a resource fair at 6 o'clock, and it's all open. There's no tickets required. You can come and go to the resource fair at 6. We'll have a series of speakers, some national folks, some local folks, and then a panel discussion that follows. And so it's an opportunity to learn about lead, to learn what you can do, to learn about resources, and also to talk about policy.
We had, as I mentioned, our Be Well Health team produced a series of multimedia reports, Lead Crisis Abandoned, last year in 2015. Let's just play a little bit from that because one of the voices on there is another person that I want to talk about who will be involved in tomorrow's program.
A high blood lead level is defined as having 5 micrograms per deciliter or more of lead in their blood. enough, health experts agree, to mentally stunt them and cause behavior problems like aggression and hyperactivity disorder. Dr. Dord Dearborn is a researcher at Cleveland's Case Western Reserve University.
Sometimes people think, oh, the lead problem's solved. No, it is not solved. And it still has an impact on our developing generation.
That first voice you heard was Sarah Jane Tribble, who was a medical reporter here now in Washington, D.C. And Dord Dearborn is actually going to be the moderator of this panel tomorrow. He's an expert in and of himself on that issue.
Absolutely. Dr. Dearborn's been a champion of this issue and environmental health from a medical standpoint for many years. The idea is to also hear locally what we're doing in Cleveland, what we're doing in the county, and tend to understand the range of agencies that are working on this issue. And there are resources available to help people. We have funds in from HUD that are able to help folks to fix problems in houses based on income qualification. And we're also going to be hearing from Dr. Mary Jean Brown, who runs the Lead and Healthy Homes Office at the CDC, who's originally a Clevelander, grew up here and is coming back to talk with us about the national picture.
So we're going to talk about what we're doing, but there's a lot about what we aren't doing. Cleveland has not done a very good job of eliminating and abating lead problems. We continue to have high lead levels in our children here, very high lead levels if you compare them to really any other neighborhood in communities across the nation. So the question, I think, sometimes would have to be putting the spotlight on what's not happening. I know the city of Cleveland is hiring 3 more inspectors. I'm told that still won't be enough to handle what's going on. What's going on with the backlog? Can Cleveland catch up? And are we talking about more than just words, because we've been hearing words for more than 2 decades?
Well, I know the city of Cleveland has worked on a plan specifically to address the backlog that you described, and we're helping. I know Environmental Health Watch is also helping to help them address the backlog. This is a huge issue, and it is a challenge without question, particularly in older communities that have a lot of older housing stock with deferred maintenance. And unfortunately, it affects often those who are facing other compounding disadvantages from poverty. And so that's why I think, as you say, it's very much an imperative that we focus on it now and not forget that this is a big problem that we can prevent.
Toledo recently passed a law that essentially says everything's got to be inspected.
Yeah.
If it's a rental property, it's got to be inspected. There are wipe tests that are done.
Right.
And then once we say that there's not a crisis here or a potential exposure, we'll give you a certification for 6 years. If there is and you abate it, we'll give you a certification for 3 years. It gives you some assurance when you're renting a place that your child is not going to get sick. That doesn't happen in Cleveland. Is that a law that needs to happen here?
Well, there's no question what Toledo put forward is a very progressive law. I think it is a great fodder for discussion here about ways to try and create lead-safe housing that folks know they can access. They can go to a site and determine where they can rent, know that their children will be safe. And I think that would be part of the policy dialogue that we'll be having tomorrow night to discuss what should happen here and what are the steps we need to take in order to create lead-safe housing and put some structure around it in the way that places like Toledo have.
And this is something that, by the way, was modeled after or similar to a law that was passed in Rochester, New York in 2005. In that instance, it was credited with helping drop lead poisoning levels among the city's children by 80%. So we're not talking about something we don't know works.
Well, I think we know that policy decisions are the gift they keep on giving. I talk about the smoke-free law that passed here in Ohio in 2006, and we saw a 30% drop in heart attacks at chief complaints in hospitals post-ban. So these are the gifts they keep on giving, big policy decisions that change the lives of kids and families into the future. So I think they're very important to consider.
Let's take one phone call here, and then we're going to wrap up and meet our octogenarians in just a moment. Actually, octogenarians and beyond. If I knew what 90s were, I would say that one. Maybe I'll figure out what the term for people over 90 is, like octogenarian, which are people in their 80s. Let's have Amy join our conversation now from Novelty. Amy, welcome.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. I was just wondering if you could briefly touch on the fact that lead can be found in soil in other places, like the public housing community in East Chicago, Indiana, that has to now vacate their homes because of the high lead levels in their soil. We talk about it in pain a lot, but it's in other places.
Okay. Terry?
Thanks, Amy, for the question. I think you bring up a very important point. Not only are we concerned about the soil around the foundations of houses where people paint, and please understand that if anybody's out there remodeling the outside of their house and it's old, you need to take steps to assure that you're not moving lead paint all over where it could affect your neighbors, it could affect your own kids. You need to take steps and call the health department and learn about what to do. But your issue also is with lead that may be contaminated from industrial reasons or from other issues that occurred in legacy pollution. Thank you, Mike.
From manufacturing.
Exactly. And so that is important. There are things people can do relative to their houses, using wood chips, using sod to cover up some of that bare soil so that kids can't get at it and communicate that to their mouths, and also taking steps to be safe while you do remodeling. But those are big issues in your case with the public housing unit affecting folks who already have a lot of other problems, and that's just not fair.
And our network of brains here has already told me it's nonagenarians, so I'm the dummy who didn't know that.
There you have it. Yeah.
So we're going to have octogenarians and nonagenarians coming up here in just a moment. Terry Allen, thank you very much for coming with us. And Amy, thank you for the question. Those are just the kinds of questions I think that would enhance a conversation tomorrow at the Natural History Museum from 6 to 9 p.m. The discussion is called Taking the Lead on Lead. At 6, it's a resource fair, and then after that, you'll get the panel discussion. Terry Allen will be a part of that, and I appreciate you being with us this morning. Thank you.
Glad to be here.
You can get details to that on our website, ideastream.org/ideasnow. Last year, we dedicated an entire episode to lead poisoning issues, and IdeaStream and our health unit dedicated an entire Be Well series to this topic, as I mentioned, called Lead Crisis Abandoned. You can find links to both of those on today's webpage, too, at ideastream.org/ideasnow. After the break, we're joined by some of Northeast Ohio's brightest professionals, but they must meet one requirement. They must be at least 80 years old. This is The Sound of Ideas. I'm Mike McIntyre. We'll be right back.
Join the conversation by calling 216-578-0903 or click on today's show at ideastream.org/ideasnow and weigh in on the Civic Commons. Coming up at 10 on The Diane Rehm Show, results and analysis of the congressional primary races, as well as concern over new Russian hacks into voting systems.
Comedian Finesse Mitchell says the time he spent as a cast member of Saturday Night Live makes him part of a tight-knit fraternity.
You know, if I see Dan Aykroyd on the street today, I can say SNL, and he goes, "Oh, that's Finesse. How are you?"
Mitchell talks about just how many doors being part of the show opened for him today during the noon hour of Here and Now, featuring the sound of applause from 90.3.
Support for 90.3 comes from the Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District. Their booklet, A Healthy Environment Starts at Home, provides information on how to protect the environment and have a healthier home. More at neorsd.org or at the open house on September 17th in Cuyahoga Heights.
While America faces new security threats and adapts to new technology, keeping the country safe is often left to the world's second oldest profession, spycraft.
The Soviet Army was easy to find. It was just hard to stop. Al-Qaeda? It's easy to stop. It's just very hard to find.
Espionage in the Age of Terror this month on America Abroad.
That comes your way tonight at 9 right after Radiolab here on 90.3.
Support for 90.3 comes from Lakeview Cemetery, with over 285 scenic acres for visitors to explore and honor those who have played significant roles in Cleveland's history. With ample resting space still available to all denominations, Lakeview Cemetery, your grounds for life.
You're back with The Sound of Ideas from 90.3. I'm Mike McIntyre. If you're like me, you believe that wisdom comes with age and that we have so much to learn from our elders. But there's a problem. Some of them just won't sit down to impart that wisdom. They're still too busy making the community a better place to live. So we're lucky this morning that our guests, one in her 80s, two in their 90s, I believe, have made time to sit down and talk with us for a few minutes. Crane's Cleveland Business, for the first time, chose to highlight and honor octogenarians and older who are making a huge impact in our community. And we have a few of the 8 over 80 class with us this morning. Connie Luta is back with us. You might recall our recent conversation with Connie, a Concord Township trustee and a pilot who's still flying. We discussed one of her passions in July, the International Women's Air and Space Museum. Connie is 86 and serving her 7th term as a trustee. Good morning. Very good to have you back with us.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Belle Lykover is with us, too. She's 96 and on the executive committee for Senior Voice, an organization that advocates for senior citizens. She often advocates before the legislature, which is where her training from the Ohio State University debate team in the 1940s comes in handy. Good morning to you, Belle.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for coming in. and also a pioneer in the field of architecture, Ohio's first black architect when he registered in 1950, founder and current chairman of Robert P. Madison International. He's in studio with us. Robert P. Madison, very good to have you here, sir.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Mr. Madison is 93, and around here you've seen projects he's had a hand in, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and Museum, where he worked with I.M. Pei, and First Energy Stadium, the Q, the bus stations on Euclid Avenue's Health Line. Really, basically anywhere you turn your head in Cleveland, you'll see the work of Robert P. Madison. Very good to have you here.
Thank you.
And we've got a whippersnapper with us, too. Tim McGaw is here, the Crain's Cleveland Business Sections editor. And if you weren't ruled ineligible as a Crain's employee, I'm sure you'd have made the 40 under 40 list by now.
Actually, funny story, my mom nominated me one year.
Even though you worked there.
Right. And my boss came over and handed me the nomination. I was like,
Great. Well, Tim is here because, actually, Tim, this is the first time you've created an 8 over 80 list. I mentioned 40 under 40. That's a pretty well-known list that happens every year, one that, by the way, I never got to make. And also, I should note that there's a relationship here. My wife is the publisher and editor at Crain's. But that is a list we've heard of before. We haven't heard of 8 over 80. It's new this year.
It is. We wanted to highlight some folks and do some stories about individuals whose life experiences, both personally and professionally, could offer our readers some valuable lessons. And the type of stories we got were much different than the 20 in their 20s or the 40 under 40, because these folks really have nothing left to prove.
But yet they're still proving it.
But they're still proving it. And I don't know how to say this. It seems like the story is a little uncensored, if you will. They were very more forthcoming about their experiences, what they might have done wrong in their past, what they would have done differently, and what they were most proud of. And I think the stories came out really wonderfully, and we were surprised. This was our first year, and this is these sections are nomination driven. Mm-hmm. So we've never done this before. And for the 8 over 80s, I think we got anywhere around 80 or 90 nominations.
You could have done 80 over 80.
We could have done 80 over 80. And just in the 20s, we got over 100. So for a first year, we were really happy with that. And we got a lot of great feedback about the section.
And the 20 in their 20s, by the way, we're going to be meeting some of those folks. We wanted to talk to the 8 in their 80s first, because you can really lay down some wisdom, I think, for these guys. And they're a captive audience right now in the green room. But really great to talk with each of you. And Robert, I want to talk to you a little bit about being a part of the greatest generation. And I wonder about how you are able to impart the values of your generation to those behind you. And we're talking about 20-year-olds that are going to come in and are listening to you. Do you find a responsibility in that way, or a lead by example type of strategy?
I think so. I think we have a responsibility to try to impart what we have learned through all these years to make this a better generation and a better world. I think I'm still somewhat working in my office, and I try to advise young people about what they should be doing, not only architecturally, but in terms of human relationships. I think we need to talk more to people. We need to less depend upon machines, and to get people involved in trying to be of help one to another. I think in my career, I was trying my best to be sure that what I could do and what I could impart was to benefit those who were in my office. I had over 200 people I hired over the course of my career.
Wow. But you hired 200 people, but when you were trying to get hired, you went to Harvard, right? You went to one of the most esteemed programs for architecture. And when you graduated from Harvard, the companies all came to get all these great architects. And you're a black man, you didn't get an interview.
No.
And you came back and started your own. You said, all right, I'm going to do this. But I wonder about dealing with that. Your father dealt with it. In an earlier generation, you dealt with it.
Yep.
How about that lesson?
Well, I was teaching at Howard University, and I said, what's the purpose of teaching students to become architects when there are no opportunities for them? Somebody's got to do it. I said, okay, I'll do it. And I had a very supportive wife and a family, and we came back to Cleveland because this is where I was born, and we opened this practice to practice architecture. It was difficult because I've tried to borrow $300 from the bank, and they said you can't do that because such a novel idea.
Borrowing money?
Black architect? It's ridiculous. But anyway, we prevailed, and one by one, we began to make some inroads into this community, and gradually we established ourselves. It was difficult, but it had to be done. My mother and father were very strong believers in that you have to. We are privileged, and we have to be sure to try to impart that to younger other people, and so that's what I was trying to do.
Belle Lykover is with us, as I mentioned. Belle is 96 years old and a public speaker, and you teach other people how to do it too, right, Belle?
Yes, I do.
You are a retiree, though, and a long-time retiree, quote. I'm putting quote marks around that.
33 years.
33 years retired. So that's 33 years of golf and bridge and doing nothing but putting your feet up, right? No.
I don't play golf. I don't play bridge. I do play a game called Royalty, which is a word game that is more challenging than any other word game I have ever experienced.
Keeps your brain sharp.
And we play that in the apartment building that I live in on a regular basis.
You mentioned in your interview with Cranes that the most important lesson you learned is about communication, that communication is key. And tell me about that, because that's been your life since retirement and before.
Yes. When I was in high school, a sophomore in high school, I tried out for the debate team. They were all men on the debate team. The coach listened to my tryout and he said, "I'm going to take a chance on you. But when I'm done with you, you will not think the same. You will not talk the same." And that's exactly what he did. And every success I've had in life, I really owe to that coach, because he taught us how to take massive amounts of information and boil it down to its essence. He also taught us how to connect with an audience. And I am always grateful for that experience.
What is the key to connecting to an audience?
The key to connecting with an audience is to make sure you have eye contact with them. You never, ever read a speech. You don't even refer to notes. It's all got to be up in your head.
I'm going to take my headphones off now because I have notes in front of me. I'm sorry, Belle.
Anyway,
There's just a lot of information.
But it is the important thing to remember when you're speaking to an audience. If you leave something out, you shouldn't worry about it, because in the question and answer period, those points will come up.
And I often say a conversation is what it is. I mean, what we get out of that conversation that day is unique and special as it is. If we didn't get to everything, the next one will get there.
Yeah.
And sometimes conversations take a different path, or a speech takes a different path.
Yes.
So you kind of have to realize communication is on a continuum. It isn't just one time.
That's right. And you have to know your subject. But what he also taught us was when you speak, you emphasize every important word with a very slight pause after that word. That gives time for that important idea to get into the head of your audience.
That sounds like the Paul Harvey approach. Right? Connie Luta is with us too. And Connie, we talked about how it all started with a sandwich. You were in a plane,
yes,
right?
right?
And the guy says, "I want a sandwich. I'm going to grab it." So you take the reins, or take the yoke,
Right.
And you did, and have been flying ever since.
Right.
But you're also involved in public life as a trustee.
Yes.
7 terms.
Yes.
But to get to the first one, you had to be defeated 3 times before that.
That's correct.
So talk a little bit about that, about the idea of persistence.
Oh, well, I don't have a reverse gear. Neither do airplanes.
That's a great point.
And so I just keep pursuing, and I believe that anyone who has a dream should keep going and keep trying no matter what.
What about the idea of keeping going in your 80s? And some people, and again, this is you go as you can go. But how does continuing each day to fly and to advocate make the next day brighter?
Well, oh dear, if I sat in my chair at home and watched TV, I would just oh no, I couldn't do that.
Can't do it.
You have to keep going, and if you have something interesting to do, it's a delight. And the next morning is bright and cheerful no matter what.
Robert, is age just a number? Yours is 93.
It's just a number.
Absolutely.
And how do you define that? What does that mean when you say age is just a number?
Excuse me. First of all, it means if you're in good health.
Yeah.
If you're in good health and you realize that life is worth living, you begin to say that numbers don't really mean that much.
That's right.
And I told my children I plan to live at least to be 100. Yeah, I'm shooting for that number. But,
right. And once you hit 100, it'll be 110.
That's exactly right. Why not? Why keep? But seriously, it's an attitude, frame of mind, and if you believe it, it will become. And that's what I really believe in.
Belle?
It's important that you do something that you feel passionate about. It makes such a big difference in your life. None of my children live in Cleveland. None of my grandchildren live in Cleveland. But the advocacy that I do really enhances my own life. And I want to tell you about something I did just this past week. When I heard President Obama speak about what had happened in Dallas and in all the killings by police of unarmed black men, I was so impressed by the speech. And then I said to myself, it's not enough to be impressed. You have to do something. So I live in an apartment building that's a real community. And I called the mayor of Shaker Heights, where I live, and I suggested to him that the police come to a meeting at our apartment building and talk about community policing. They came on Monday night. 40 people from that apartment building showed up too. It was remarkable. And what we learned that none of us really knew was that the Shaker Heights Police Department is in the process of transforming itself. They started 8 years ago. They said they are going from a warrior mentality to a guardian mentality. And they talked about all the things that are now important to them as police.
And you know that, and your neighbors know that because
we know it
because
now.
you brought them in to have them say it.
That's right. But we didn't know it before.
And I want to ask Tim McGaw about that. Tim, we have 3 of the 8 over 80, and what I'm hearing from each one of these folks is the engagement with community. And I wonder if that was a theme through all of the 8, that it's not just that they have achieved greatness and they're looking back on laurels, but in each instance, as I read them, it seemed like one of the criterion that you were looking at, or one of the criteria that you were looking at, was indeed the idea that they're still engaged.
Right. I think the big element was that they were still contributing, and we also were looking for folks who weren't. We were looking for new names too. Sometimes there are these certain people in Cleveland that everybody knows, and we were looking for some unique stories and some unique angles on people that our readers haven't heard about before.
And we saw some new names and some familiar names because Robert P. Madison is a pretty darn familiar name.
Absolutely.
But you can't, and I know Connie, and certainly I've heard of Belle too, but maybe you don't see them in the headlines all the time today, and there are still some that are.
And I think some people might have been surprised about how active they still are.
Yeah, I wonder about that. Should we? Is that an insult for us to say, "Wow, we're surprised you're in your 90s and still ticking"? I mean, I would think you would say, "Listen, what else am I going to do?"
Well,
Connie?
That's true. What else am I going to do? But it's still, you have to have good health, and it helps you to be active. It helps to keep your good health, I think.
Let's take a call in here, Connie, from Maureen. She's been holding from Middleburg Heights and would like to engage with you guys. Maureen, welcome to the show.
Hi, Mike. I want to say a bunch of things, so I better do it fast.
Okay.
I just turned 70, which is just freaking me out. I retired at 60 as a teacher in Cleveland, and it seems like when you retire, the day before you were a teacher and you were viable and you had a currency, and the day after you retire, you fall into this gray area, this limbo where you just become elderly. And they seem to, culturally, we stereotype the elderly, and we don't realize that the intellect that's in the head of those people is still there, even as you progress and as your body starts to get aches and pains and arthritis and other stuff. You're still a functioning intellect, and you're very useful to the community. But it's hard to find your niche because so many people perceive us to be geriatric, elderly, in whatever they define it as subjectively. And plus they look at the container that we're in and they say, oh, that's an old person. And then all of the stereotypes fall into
the container that we're in?
What was that?
The container that we're in, you said.
The container that you're in, yes.
I just like the terminology.
It looks different than the container you were in at 30.
Or the one you think you're still in, right? Your residual self-image.
Oh, I know I'm not in that one.
Okay.
But anyway, it's lovely that people are acknowledging the abilities of the folks you're talking to, plus those other 77 that did not that are out there also of the 80 over 80.
Well, it's 8 over 80, but yeah, there were 77 more applications. Maureen, we thank you very much for your thoughts. I really appreciate that. And I wanted to take a couple of minutes to end this part of our conversation by asking our octogenarians and nonagenarians what advice that they would give to our folks coming in. We're not going to have time for it because it's going to be a quick switch, but we're bringing in the 20 in their 20s. Couple of them, and I wanted to know what you would say, Belle, and let's give it a your elevator speech. What's the advice to a 20-year-old coming up that you would give?
Well, the 20-year-old's environment is so different than mine, but they have to really be prepared for change, because they are going to see so many changes with all the technology today. And they have to be prepared for that kind of change in their life.
Right, because when you were in your teens, it was like the iPhone 2, right? A little bit of change since then. Connie, what's your advice to 20-somethings?
Stay true to your ideals and do everything honestly, and don't look for reward. Just do the job really, really well, and the rewards will come.
I also hear you say this is your last term, but you've said that like 5 other times.
That's right.
So who knows? You might have an 8th term as a trustee.
Who knows?
Robert P. Madison, we'll end it with you. What's your advice?
I would say believe in yourself. Have confidence in yourself, and also believe that others share that same belief. And getting along with other people is essential in our society, in our world today. And I really believe that the world is out there. It's beckoning for these younger people, and they should take it and run with it. It's a great place. There's only one place to be, and that's alive.
Guys, what a great conversation. It's been my distinct pleasure to be able to sit down and talk with you, Mr. Madison. Very good to meet you.
Thank you.
And very nice to talk with you again, Belle Lykover, and as well, Connie. You're a regular here. We'll see you in a couple of months, I guess.
Oh, I don't know about that.
Very good to have you. Tim McGaw is going to hang with us. We've just gained the insights of some of those in the greatest generation. After the break, we'll check in with the latest generation. This is Sound of Ideas. I'm Mike McIntyre. We'll be right back.
Join the conversation by calling 216-578-0903 or send an email to soi@wcpn.org. You can also join us on Facebook and Twitter. We're at Sound of Ideas. On tomorrow's show, we'll talk with a documentarian from the BBC on her experience chronicling Ohio's opioid epidemic through the experiences of families in Lorain County.
People around the world see America picking a president, and they're confused.
It's such a bad-tempered campaign. I think Africans are saying, hey, is this really an American election?
And Canadians are riveted.
We're always paying attention to what goes on down there, even if it wasn't this particular race, but this year. You just can't take your eyes off of it.
The world watches us vote on the world.
Join us for the world this afternoon at 3 right after Fresh Air here on 90.3.
Support for 90.3 comes from Blooms by Plantscaping, where designers help clients celebrate life's important events. Remarkable flowers for remarkable people. More information at bloomsbyplantscaping.com. Support for 90.3 comes from Oberlin College and Conservatory, announcing the Artist Recital Series. Subscriptions available now. Season starts September 17th and features music from jazz to Baroque to symphonic. 800-371-0178 and oberlin.edu/artsguide.
Over the years, IdeaStream has asked for your thoughts on our region's biggest assets and challenges in order to better inform our programming and coverage. For this year's Listening Project Assets and Challenges Survey, IdeaStream would like your answers to the following 4 questions. What are Northeast Ohio's top 5 assets? What are the top 5 assets that you bring to the community? What are your top 5 personal challenges? And what are Northeast Ohio's top 5 challenges? You can answer those questions online right now at ideastream.org/LP. And as always, thanks.
You're back with The Sound of Ideas. That's song 22, sung by me. I have an amazing voice. Maybe it's Taylor Swift. We met some amazing senior citizens this morning who continue to make a difference in our community. Now we're going to meet with millennials who are already making a difference. Our guests are barely out of college. One is barely out of high school. Still, they're making their mark on the community as the 2016 class of the Crain's Cleveland Business 20 in their 20s. Group, and starting with Simone Swanson. She's 27, the community liaison for The Gathering Place. That's an organization that offers programs and services to people with cancer and their family and friends. Very good to have you with us, Simone.
Hi, thank you.
Nice to have you here. 23-year-old Carlin Jackson is no stranger to The Sound of Ideas. He joined us as a Cleveland Heights High School senior standout 5 years ago. Now he's a software engineer and founder of Theo Wise David Limited and a graduate of Case Western Reserve University. Very good to have you back, Carlin.
My pleasure.
And also here is the youngest on the list and barely old enough to make the list. 20-year-old Zyla Foxlin is here. Very good to have you with us, Zyla.
Thank you for having me.
You're going to college now?
I am, yes.
Where are you a student?
Case Western Reserve.
And then you're also an entrepreneur and community activist and all things to all people. I don't know how people do this at the age of 20.
You know, you got lots of energy. Just
it is energy.
Do all the things.
Hey, and Tim McGaw is with us too. And Tim, what a swing from 8 in over 80 to 20 in their 20s. What distinguished the two groups, or were there commonalities?
The big commonality was what we just talked about was the engagement. These folks are doing much more than just going to school. They're starting companies. They're involved on boards. They're involved in community issues. And this is always we haven't done a 20 in their 20s in a couple years. We have pretty much been doing 40 under 40. So it was nice to bring in these other dynamics with the 8 over 80 and the 20 in their 20s. But this is always a really humbling project to hear a lot of the reporters say this. Most of our reporters in their 20s and 30s. And
right.
They think about what they were doing when they were 20 or 23.
Yeah, you guys Xbox, probably. Me, Atari. That basically was what I did when I wasn't working.
Stuck in the college newspaper newsroom. But these folks are starting companies, and it's pretty humbling, and you always kind of walk away going, oh.
Yeah. Well, we're going to get some of that right now. By the way, you can join our conversation. You want to interact with these 20-somethings. 216-578-0903. 866-578-0903 is our toll-free number. And you can shoot us an email, soi@wcpn.org, or follow us on Twitter @Sound of Ideas. And Simone, you're you work for The Gathering Place.
I do.
But in addition to that, you're the editor of a magazine, CL
Yes.
Magazine. So what's the idea behind that?
Sure. So, first of all, thanks for having me today.
Thank you for being here.
That's how they always start those off.
Yeah,
Thanks
exactly.
For having me.
Pleasure to have you.
So CL Magazine is a project of Alexandria Boone. She is the founder of the Women of Color Foundation, which is the foundation that focuses on professional development, mentorship, and a number of other things for women of color. So she just started her we're actually heading into our second year of the CL Magazine, which is a career and lifestyle magazine. It covers topics from everything from finances to professional development to fashion to we literally cover everything. So this magazine, it's a digital publication. It's quarterly, and so people can subscribe to it at clmagazine.com.
And that's in your free time. I mean, you got a job, too.
I do. That's like a job. I'm involved in Engage Cleveland. Yeah, I'm always adding things to my plate.
What makes you do that? What makes you see the community component as such an important thing?
Like I said in my in my piece, for me, I literally don't feel comfortable. Like, I don't think I'm where I want to be, obviously where I want to ultimately be in life, but I do think that there are young women out there who I can kind of mentor or help in some kind of capacity. So it's always been a passion of mine to give back. Like, I don't feel comfortable having things and not giving back to in some degree. So. Why,
did somebody do that for you?
I was very fortunate to have parents who, I'm an only child, so my parents have always been a strong, they've been strong role models in my life. I have a number of aunts and uncles and cousins, so I had that. I was fortunate to have that, but I know through college I kind of experienced people who, I did a couple alternative spring break projects, and I saw kids who didn't have that, and I saw what happened when they didn't have that. So I just made it my goal to kind of give back to those people who aren't as fortunate as I am.
Zyla, you're all about hugs.
I am all about hugs.
So tell me a little bit about this, how you combine technology and hugs and missing your boyfriend into something that now has become something that's really cool.
Yeah, well, I think, when people towards the end of high school start thinking about, what am I going to go to college for? Am I going to go to college? What am I going to go do? People don't usually think of engineering as a service-based career, as something that will really impact the way the world works and impact people. And I think that's really wrong because, the whole point of going into engineering, the whole point of building things, of designing things, of coding things is for people. Everything we do is to aid people. And so I was thinking about projects that I wanted to do. I had some funding from ThinkBox, which is Case's makerspace, and it was kind of sitting there. I had a deadline where I had to build a project and spend the money. And at the same time, I had been in a long-distance relationship for about a year at that point. And I was like, there's nothing I really want to say to my boyfriend right now. There's nothing that I want to text, but I do just a hug, like something nonverbal, and that in of itself is the foundation of how people interact. And I started thinking about it, and I was like, how come we haven't integrated touch or any sort of physical connection into the way people interact online? And people are constantly complaining that texting is making people grow distant from each other.
Right.
But no one's done a whole lot to solve the problem. So, it was kind of, I had 36 hours at a hackathon in Michigan. I stopped at Target, bought a couple teddy bears, and decided to build the project.
So the project is a teddy bear that when you hug it and someone else has a matching teddy bear, wherever they may be, it vibrates and lets you know that you're hugging them at that moment, right?
Right.
And then they hug it back?
Yep, and they hug it back, and you'll feel it on your end. And if both of you are hugging the bear at the same time, then you'll feel the heartbeat of the other person.
Wow.
What was it like? This has started to evolve beyond a project at Case. You've actually turned it into a company and secured funding for it. What was taking that leap like?
That, as I like to put it, I think I tripped and fell and started a company. It was definitely not an intentional decision. I didn't go into the project hoping to turn it into a company. And actually, the first person that suggested it should be a startup, I literally laughed at. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, no,
it's a teddy bear.
Who would want this? And then kind of things started happening. The Innovation Summit at Case was in October of last year. It was right after I'd built the first prototype. We'd gotten a lot of attention at this hackathon because, how many people can build a full hardware project in 36 hours? So just by doing that, we got some attention. And then Case was like, hey, you should showcase this at the Innovation Summit. And suddenly everyone was like, my grandchildren live, 3 days drive from me. I just really wish I had a way to connect with them. And people would be like, I grew up and, I'm in the Air Force. My kids are at home. I really wish I had a way to connect with them. And we started realizing how big of a technology this could really become.
Wow.
And then Case ran this contest to see what students would get to go to the Consumer Electronics Show that year. And we ended up losing the contest, but they let us go anyway. And there everyone shared their story with us. All these business people who came in with very, defined goals, abandoned them and just talked to us for half an hour, about hugs and how much they loved their family and how much they loved, seeing projects like this at a show that's filled with drones and 3D printers. So it was really, I think at CES we knew that we had to take it to the next level.
And you call it Perry Hug.
Perry Hug, yes.
All right. Carlin, you were probably much more intentional about starting your company, because I think I remember 5 years ago when you took a look at our soundboard and maybe made some suggestions on how it might be better as a 19-year-old, said, this is what I'm going to do. And you're one of those people that said what you were going to do, and 5 years later, you did it. You graduated from Case. You started your own tech company. Tell me a little bit about the intentionality of that at the age of 23.
Yes, going back to 5 years ago, I said I wanted to stay in Cleveland because I firmly believed that this region was on an upswing and that things would really only get better from where we were at. I think it's definitely true. The past 5 years, different developments, different amazing things, and I think really around the world, people are starting to take notice of Cleveland and the region again. And for me, I want to be involved, to be able to say that I had just a little bit of an effect, that maybe I was able to participate in the resurgence of the region. And for me, whether it's through the work I do in a professional context, having to do with technology or finance or business, or any of the involvement I have with the community, I want to be able to say that I had a helping hand in making that happen.
And you are combining tech and finance and all of that stuff. You're a software engineer. Tell me what Theo Wise David Limited does.
So it's a boutique consultancy that I created earlier this year, and really to formalize a lot of the business relationships I've had with different folks, individuals of the past couple of years. My academic background is computer science, and then I actually received a master's in finance from the Weatherhead School of Business at Case as well.
Wait a minute, you were in high school 5 years ago.
Yeah, I like to say this past half decade's been very productive for me. So, but yeah, it's a vehicle through which I pursue contracts and projects with different folks that allows me to either technology, finance, or anything in between, general strategy. It's a very amazing opportunity that I've been able to be on over the past 9 months or so. Maybe
you can help Zyla manage her money after she makes a killing in this Perry Hug business.
Yes, please.
Simone, what's a misconception of millennials that you wish would go away?
Ooh, that's a good question. A misconception. I guess that we're lazy. I think like older generations kind of look at us and say, oh, they have all this technology and, they're obsessed with, just using social media. But I think that what's missed is that our generation is actually very philanthropic. Like we value giving back. We realize that we don't just exist for ourselves for the most part. So I don't think we're lazy. I think we exist in a time where there's a lot of pressure to be successful. So I think most millennials are trying to reach that success, and I don't think we're lazy.
Zyla, how are millennials changing the world already, and what do you see happening in the next couple of decades as you all become the 30 and 40 under 40 folks?
Yeah, I think, the millennials are growing up in an age that's extremely different from, all of the generations before us, because we had the computer. And I think, we're always going to look back, and the computer is the wheel. It's the printing press. It's the compass. It's one of those inventions that changes the world really, really quickly. And, we got to start growing up with a computer. And if you grow up with a computer, you think about the way the world works in a very different sense. You think of it almost more like a computer would, because that's natural to you as you grow up. So we can adapt to technology very, very quickly, and we can see changes. And I also think that a large part of the culture in my generation is learning to take risks. And traditionally, risk has always been associated with privilege. Like, you can only start a company if you're privileged enough to do so. But now millennials have learned to find those safety nets. How can I be a student and be on financial aid, but also, start a company at the same time? And so just so many of the things that have driven the past are changing, and I think the millennials are going to push that forward.
I'd like to remind you that you're listening to Zyla Foxland, who is 20 years old. I mean, you started a couple of companies by the time you were 20, right?
7.
Yeah. 7 companies. I wonder about the idea, and we've got just a couple of minutes here, but perhaps, Carlin, you can bring us down this path. We've done a number of programs here about the lack of diversity in the tech field, specifically minority diversity and gender diversity. And here I'm sitting in front of a black man who has started a tech company and a minority woman who has started a tech company, and neither one of you are in the sort of the wheelhouse of technology. And I wonder about that. I wonder about sort of blazing the trail your own self. We talked to Robert Madison, who blazed the trail in architecture. You guys are blazing your own. Do you think about that?
I do. It's been kind of interesting. Over the past 5 years, a number of folks have candidly told me, Carlin, you're the first African American I've been able to experience maybe this professional context with, or had this nature of a highly technical conversation with. And over time, I've realized that for many, I'm the first contradiction to maybe preconceived notions or any stereotypes, good or bad. But really, oftentimes, I'm the unique one that they might meet. And it's a bit of a responsibility to say that, hey, let me show you that I'm, a normal individual, or probably a better way of putting it is that there's just a lot more similarity that you would think. There's a lot, while everyone is unique, everyone is diverse, everyone has a different perspective, we all, at the end of the day, if I'm with a bunch of computer scientists, we're going to talk very nerdy things. If I'm
Stuff I won't understand.
Right. If I'm with friends in private equity, we're going to talk about, some intriguing things there. It's just really about, understanding the similarities and having comfort with the uniqueness that is there.
I can say you are not normal in any way. Neither are any of you. Thanks, all of you, for being with us. Carlin, D.T. Jackson, Simone Swanson, Zyla Foxen. Really nice meeting all of you.
Nice meeting you.
And Tim McGaugh, thanks for taking us through the conversation.
Thanks
Appreciate
for having
it.
us.
If you'd like to leave the last word on the topic, call us at 216-916-6397. That's 916-NEWS. I'm Mike McIntyre. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow.
Support for coverage of community issues programming on 90.3 WCPN Idea Stream comes from the George Gunn Foundation, advancing Cleveland and Northeast Ohio; Eaton, powering business worldwide; the George W. Codrington Charitable Foundation, supporting public projects in Cuyahoga County; and the Nord Family Foundation, endeavoring to build community and improve the quality of people's lives.
Support for 90.3 comes from Marianne Hansen and Hansen Services, making it possible for older adults to choose to stay in their own home by helping them with daily living activities. Hansen Services, 216-226-5425.
Support for 90.3 comes from the Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District.
This is 90.3 WCPN Cleveland. Idea Stream.